Welcome back to Self-Love Ignited. On today's episode, I am interviewing Diane Hilleary. Diane talks to us all about starting messy, breaking out of perfectionism, and using self-compassion along this journey. Diane is a psychotherapist and mindfulness instructor, with more than 15 years experience teaching skills and strategy to empower clients to find freedom from shame and live more compassionate lives. She also gives us a really beautiful and very simple 3-step process that we can use to develop more self-compassion. This is a great episode. I cannot wait for you to meet Diane. Dive on in. My name is Katie Allen, and this is Self-Love Ignited. Let's get to it. Okay, welcome back to Self-Love Ignited. Today on the podcast, I am interviewing Diane Hilleary. Diane, welcome. Why don't you just take a moment and tell everybody a little bit about you?
Okay, well, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here. I am a psychotherapist and a mindful self-compassion teacher. I am a certified eating disorder therapist, but I'm in the middle of sort of a midlife pivot towards wanting to teach more mindfulness and do more with the self-compassion work. And I recently moved from am in the States. I recently moved from Atlanta, the big city, to the coast. And so I'm in the midst of also that slowing down. Now we have all these animals and we've got, land. So it's a whole thing, a whole midlife pivot.
That sounds beautiful. Midlife pivot in your business, moving out to the coast. Oh, that sounds like juicy and wonderful and relaxing and exciting all at the same time.
Yes, juicy is a good word for it.
Yeah. Beautiful. So this podcast is obviously, it's in the name. This is all about talking about self-love and telling the stories of women just like you who have come from a place of not liking parts of themselves, not loving parts of themselves, to really embracing all that they are. So I would love to hear your story, and I just want to invite you to start from the beginning. Tell us a little bit about your unique challenges, really.
Okay. Well, I was a very sensitive kid. And so my family actually still tells the story that I didn't smile until I was 6. And so I was shy and anxious, and my siblings were super outgoing. So I think that not understanding that having that high sensitivity and then, feeling like a lot of people would say, oh, don't take that so seriously, or, oh, you don't need to be upset about that. And so not realizing that that was, this sort of chronic message that I was getting that what you're feeling is wrong. And so I took that as, oh, it must be that there's something wrong with me. So I think I, brought that into adulthood, and I had a long pattern of maybe if I'm a perfect student and the right kind of friend. And I was really religious as a teenager. And so I think there was also some, religious guilt that got played into that, coming up. I basically arrived in adulthood with some depression and some anxiety and a really loud inner critic. That was pretty much just saying, I had definitely body image stuff too. I really struggled with acne, and that was so painful. But I think the deeper thing was always just feeling like I wasn't a good person, and I had to really focus on earning my worthiness by hustling all the time.
Yeah. Oh, my heart breaks for younger you, because I mean, it sounds like, this wasn't an intended thing from your family. It was just, but it became the narrative again and again and again. And obviously you know this, but as young people's brains are so impressionable, and, it doesn't take much to sort of put you over the line of getting stuck in that loop. So I can really see that. That sounds awful. So tell us about then, sort of as you became, through childhood into your teenage years, you said how this developed. How did this follow you into adulthood?
Yeah, I really sort of carved out my worthiness as a perfect student. I had a goal to have really perfect grades, and so I carried that into college. So it ended up playing out in perfectionism, a lot of focus on what's the right thing to do, like researching. So never asking what do I need or what do I want, but instead asking what should I be doing? What's the right thing to do? Which is really exhausting. And so I think that I ended up with lots of striving, lots of hustling, of just finding over and over again that I would be totally burned out and have way pushed past my limits because I wasn't able to think about what my body needed or what I was feeling. I was just trying to get it right.
Yeah. So would you say that you were just really like disconnected from you? Like sort of it was all about what they said I should be. Like I'm saying they, I know nobody else can see me. I'm like the quote unquote like what they
Yeah.
say I should be.
Yes, yes, so much. Yeah, really feeling like I somehow had and I think again, like you said, totally unintentional. I had gotten the message that I should hide who I really was, and I should try to be who they, quote unquote, they wanted me to be, and felt really disconnected from even knowing, what I was feeling or what I was wanting.
Yeah, yeah. And your story is so common. I mean, on this podcast and in real life, I talk to women all the time, and it's like for so many women, just asking the question, what do I want and what do I need? Like that is a huge question because this is all too common,
Right.
unfortunately. Yeah. So there you were in sort of, early adulthood, and this perfectionism had followed you, and you were sort of really disconnected from yourself and what you wanted and you needed. Because you're obviously very different today, you've come a long way from that person. So how did you even begin to start checking in with yourself and creating that relationship with asking what you needed?
I think one thing that helped me so much was reading the book The Highly Sensitive Person by Elaine Aron in my early 20s. And so then being able to start with, oh, this is a thing, this is a way to be, and it's okay that I'm this way. So having some self acceptance through that lens. And then I also I went to therapy and I became a therapist. And so through my training, learning about basically how to regulate emotions, like learning that emotions were a normal thing to have, and that when I had very intense emotions, there's this certain term called distress tolerance, which is basically like I can tolerate intense emotional distress without doing something to make it worse, or without doing something to hurt myself, like addiction or those kind of patterns. And so that was like a game changer for me. Like, oh, you can have very intense emotions without, having a total like unbearable flooding meltdown. And so once I was like, oh, I can be really distressed and I can self-soothe and I can distract, then I feel like that was another game changer. And the other thing that came with that was this mantra that I came across, which was I think I came through through therapy as well. This idea of gentleness and baby steps, that really finding the balance between, like, yes, there are ways that I hope to grow, and that makes sense that I feel frustrated, about certain patterns that I'm repeating, and also we're all human. We're doing the best we can. We're all imperfect and messy and struggling and suffering. And so that gentleness piece of, can I just be with myself as I am, was critical.
Yeah, that's massive because I mean, how are you supposed to create a loving relationship with yourself if you don't have that gentleness? Like it really sounds simple. It's not,
No.
but it really is a key piece.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then the baby steps would be like, then I could push past, I could say, oh, I'm really anxious about this thing, but I'm just going to take one small step instead of the black and white, I'm either all good or all bad. I'm either doing this or I'm not doing this. It really helped me to be like, what's one small step I'm going to take today? I can be okay with where I am now, and I can still take a few steps forward.
Yeah. And that sort of small steps approach, does that like do you apply that in all areas of life? Like is that like a universal sort of principle for you now?
It really is. Yeah. Like when I wanted to start doing yoga, I was at a conference and they had free yoga in the mornings. And so I was like, well, it's at like 6 a.m. I'm a night person. I'll just see if I can get there. So the first day I got there half an hour late and I was like, hey, I showed up. So it's the baby steps and also then celebrating the small wins,
Hmm.
being like, I was late, but I showed up. And then the second day, it's like I only got there 10 minutes late. So, but if I had been like, I have to be there on time, then I would have never gone at all. So it is definitely in my, business, in my parenting, in my everything is, can I acknowledge some small steps and not be so, it's kind of a way to get unstuck from the inner critic.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because the inner critic really rises up when it in with that all or nothing. Because inevitably, like you said before, we're all human, we're all messy, we're all just sort of doing the best we can. And if you are sort of in that black and white mindset and you don't get that perfection, then you have failed. And then the inner critic is like, oh, this is my time. And that's when it gets really loud.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's certainly really helpful with business too, because I think like with parenting, that was more private. So if I made the mistakes, it was easier to hide. But with wanting to teach mindful self-compassion, you got to do that in front of other people. um, and so it seems important to give myself permission to, if I want to start, it's going to have to start messy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Start
be good.
messy. I love it. Let's start messy. That's it. Actually, I might even name this episode that. Who knows? So Diane, I would love to hear one question that I like to ask everybody because I find it really interesting is, do you resonate with the term self-love? This story that you're telling of sort of learning, creating this relationship with yourself. Is this a self-love journey? Is this like self-discovery? Is this self-care? Like what feels true to you?
Yeah, I think that I don't actually use that term very much. I think I resonate more with self-acceptance. The beginning of the journey was self-acceptance, just knowing myself better and being okay with, my limitations and celebrating my strengths. And then I think I really resonate a lot with self-compassion because I guess that's my training, but also the idea that thinking about the difference between self-compassion and self-esteem. Like self-esteem means that we have to be good at things in order to have it. And that's sometimes we really mess something up and we still need to be able to care for ourselves. And so the idea that I can be kind to myself, which essentially is the same thing as self-love, but I think just the word that I use more is like, compassion is, being present to suffering and having the urge to take action to relieve it. So can I be present to my own suffering and just be with myself as I am and take care of myself, just as I am.
That's beautiful. Yeah, that is beautiful. I think I love asking this question because self-love is something I personally resonate with, but in doing this podcast and in talking to other people, I've really realized that a lot of people don't, and that quite often sort of self-care and self-love are so, especially sort of, on online, they're so like interconnected, and it is a really confusing thing and quite a triggering thing for a lot of people, that word. So
Yeah.
it's so great for me to hear how you break it down for yourself, and it's a really beautiful way of breaking it down. Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah.
Yeah, I think that there is some like, even though I'm like all about self-love, there is some like resistance to the term, which is interesting. I hadn't really thought about that before.
Hmm. Hmm. You are
Yeah.
not alone. Hear it all the time. Like you said, we're all just humans going through this life. It's messy, and we're all on this journey. And
Hmm.
yeah, it's. I think it's when we see that little bit of resistance or that little stickiness that we go, "Ooh, there's something there that could use a
Yeah.
little bit of TLC." Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
I
So
love it.
I would love to hear a little bit more about some of the practices or exercises that you found most helpful on this journey, so that coming into that self-acceptance, which you said was sort of your first stage before moving into that like self-compassion, really, how did you start to do that on a practical level? Did you like meditate every day? Was it yoga? Did you journal? Like what were the actual things that you were doing that you found the most helpful?
I think what was most helpful for me was my female friendships, honestly, just having being able to say what I like, having space where I could be messy and not really know what I was trying to say, and then have someone get it and reflect it back to me, and kind of creating ideas by building on top of what the other one was saying. um, I think that was really a critical practice for me, and from there then I really tried to meditate for years, and I was so anxious that I could not sit still. So it's funny now that I am a meditation teacher. But the thing that gave me the entrance into meditation was definitely the noticing practice, like just being like, can I just notice what I'm telling myself, what I'm feeling in my body, um, and then the self compassion gave me the permission to say, the first time I did like a meditation retreat, it was a mindful self-compassion retreat. And so it was the permission to be like, you don't have to sit totally still. You don't have to do a breathing practice exactly right. You can just do what's best for you. What do you need? And I was like, oh, that you can just break all the rules of meditation. Okay, I can be down with that. So now it is definitely, meditation, but really I think it breaks down to noticing and then responding to what I notice with kindness and care.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I love that you said too, that sort of those female friendships, because I think it's one of the reasons this podcast exists really is, I think women are so much stronger when we come together and when we have real heartfelt conversations. And I think most of us are quite good at like bearing our souls pretty easily.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of healing in that, but you do also have to find people who you feel really safe with, right? And that
Yeah.
sometimes is easier said than done, but yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I'm finding in the pandemic that I'm in some coaching groups that are people all across the world finding connection with, and it's just so powerful to feel seen. I mean, there's just, it really makes a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, how has, because I know it has, inevitably it has, how has this journey of you getting to accept yourself and developing this self compassion and this beautiful relationship with yourself, how did this influence your journey into being a business owner? Because I know that those two are very intricately connected.
Yes, yes. I was a therapist and balancing being a therapist and a mom for years, where I just did not feel comfortable striking out on my own. I did not feel safe with that. And I think the more, and even when I first started, when I started my own business, I very much I basically just followed the template of what someone else had done because that was the only thing that felt safe. And so I think as really coming into the self-compassion practice and the noticing and the responding with kindness and allowing myself to be juicy and messy and all of that imperfectness, that was where I really started to have more dreams about the business, that like the idea of like, I could really do something different. I could teach larger classes. I could move away from my home of the last 25 years, I could pivot.
Yeah.
So I think that is definitely connected,
Yeah.
because it was scary when I didn't trust myself.
Yes, business is a scary thing, also a beautiful thing, but terrifying. Yeah.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about the business that you have now and the work that you do.
So I teach an 8-week mindful self-compassion class, which is based on the work of Kristen Neff and Chris Germer. And I think the thing that is so really maybe might be a good thing for listeners to hear is the three components of that, which are just noticing the mindfulness, and then the common humanity, which is that idea of we're all imperfect, we're all messy. When we're suffering, it makes us feel like we've done something wrong or we're abnormal, but really that's what connects us, the most, is just the truth of being a messy human. And then can I, notice what I'm experiencing and turn towards myself with kindness. So I'm really just teaching that over and over to individuals and in groups. So I teach an 8-week class, and then I do some, online. Do have an online free meditation weekly. So I really just think that so much of what we're facing right now, with especially in the States, the divisiveness, the racial unrest and the political unrest, we just need compassion all around. And so it feels, like something that is important to me to put out into the world and that I really enjoy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to make sure to put all the links to all of that in the show notes. So if anybody is interested or they want to learn more about that 8-week program that you have, that it's very, very easy to do so.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Yeah. So if there was somebody like back at the beginning of this, where you were in your early 20s and they were looking to get started, would you suggest that they get started with those 3 steps that you just said? Is that like a starting point?
Yeah, I think that it's really helpful because you can break it down into a little practice called a self-compassion break.
Mhm.
So basically you could be, it doesn't have to be a meditation, which I love that about it. It could just be like I'm in the middle of, I just said something that I think is stupid at a work meeting, and I pause and I say, oh, I've got like the shame feeling, and just notice it and label it. And then say, everyone makes mistakes in work meetings. This is not just me. So that's the step 2. And then step 3, is there anything can I set an intention to be kind to myself when I'm feeling this way? Because if it was anyone else in my life, I would want them, I would never speak to them the way I'm speaking to myself right now.
Yeah.
So I think that little practice, and then also the question, how would I treat a friend? Just going back to that over and over again.
Yeah, and no, I love those too because they are, like you said, you can use it anywhere, like in a work meeting. Like nobody else around you needs to know that that's what's happening in your head.
Yeah. The
Yeah.
other thing I really do, like in public now sometimes, is I try to calm my own nervous system with touch. So like in a session, if I'm with a client and I'm getting triggered in some way, I will like put one of my hands on the other and kind of like offer myself a comforting touch that way, and know that that can actually calm down my nervous system. So I think that's also like a little secret thing that nobody has to know about. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, because I mean, when you can gift yourself that, something as simple as that self-touch or that
Mhm.
like, that little mini practice that you just said, like they're simple things on the surface, but they can really, truly, profoundly change how you relate to yourself and that inner critic. Like they can change everything. It's the little
Yeah.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah, it really, I when I first started learning mindful self-compassion, I did a practice of repeating the mantra, may I know that I'm good enough just as I am. And my husband and I used to have this joke where I would say like, oh, I did this stupid thing at a meeting. Do you think that makes me a bad person? And he was always like, obviously no. And I knew that he didn't think that, but I thought that. So having that practice of repeating that mantra really did change things for me. I really know now that I am not a bad person, but
Yeah.
it took a while to know that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a beautiful practice. I love that your husband was like, okay, here we go. She's
I mean,
asking.
it just eventually became like, just answer the question. I'm not going to believe you anyway, probably, but let's just make it a little game.
Right. Like, come on, honey, work with me here. Just tell me what I need. Yeah. So, Diane, as we're sort of getting ready to wrap up, I want to know, is there anything else that feels important or any other like tips or advice or anything else that you would like listeners to know before we wrap up?
I think I would say keep going. Things are pretty dark right now and pretty overwhelming. And I certainly have had moments where I felt really hopeless that things would ever change. And I would just keep planting the seeds and keep taking the small steps. And then suddenly I would be surprised by a lovely bloom, that I had planted a long time ago. So I would certainly say, keep going. It's worth it.
Keep going. Beautiful. Beautiful. I love it. Okay, Diane, thank you so much for being here. I think we're going to leave it there. There's so much good stuff that you and I have talked about. I feel like we could like dive really deep into a lot of this stuff, but in the interest of time, we'll leave it there. So thank you so much for joining me and for sharing your story and your insights and your wisdom. And I really appreciate you. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. I really love connecting and really enjoy your work. So I'm grateful to be a part of it.
All of the links mentioned during the episode are down in the show notes. Please make sure to go on over and check them out.
Also, please remember to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, and I would be forever grateful if you would go on over and leave us a review on iTunes as well. That's going to help this message reach more women. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Here is to you loving yourself.